Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started here. And these mics are doing multiple duties, and I'm just going to speak from here to introduce our session. On Placemaking in Rural Tennessee, Arts in McNairy. And we're principally going to be sharing the success story from Selmer, Tennessee, and the community arts group known as Arts in McNairy, and many accomplishments by that group in the past few years. Our participants are Sean Pitts. He is one of the founders of Arts in McNairy and currently the Heritage and Cultural Arts chairman for the group. And we have with us former McNairy County Mayor Jay Templeton, who is now Deputy Commissioner with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. Current Selmer City Mayor David Robinson's with us. And then as respondents, discussants, Donald Phan, the director of the Arts Center of Cannon County in Woodbury, Middle Tennessee, and our keynote speaker, Tom Borat, with Creative Community Builders. I have been especially delighted with the progress in Selmer and the accomplishments of Arts in McNairy. And those will be detailed in Sean's presentation. But it's been a situation of a community arts group actively embracing, from my side of the street in the Folklife program, their traditional culture, traditional music, and especially craft heritage in a really aggressive way that has been inclusive in recognizing assets and in involving constituencies that sometimes aren't part of the formula with community arts organizing. But it's given the organization incredible momentum and empowerment and involved lots of stakeholders in the county in what they're doing. And I think that's one of the keys to their accomplishments. Two of the points brought out in Tom's keynote speech to me this morning really struck me as applying with Arts in McNairy. The phrase emotional attachment to place. I think Dr. Sean Pitts really embodies that. He's a local guy and he knows what's in his county. He knows what they should be proud of, and he's made it their business in part of this to remind people about that and to document that and make it an integral part of the overall programming and moving towards the success of every community arts dream, organization's dream, and that is a facility. And they have, as you'll see, a wonderful restored historic building that has really laid a foundation for a whole new generation of programming there. But the other thing, I think even more importantly, was Tom's reference to the healthy and functional civic culture. And I think Sean has wisely suggested the involvement of former Mayor Templeton and Mayor Robinson to show that the civic culture there really has, their success has been met in kind by response in the political arena and support by the councils and so forth, and in turn support for securing federal money for the realization of this dream of a building. And so it's been a really important set of accomplishments feeding into each other and really a programming and strategizing partnership on several different levels that have really fit together to help them get to where they are. We are sorry that we are so close to Selmer, and that's one reason why we're showing off, and we wish that each of you could actually go visit the new facility, see the murals, see some of the things that are going on, but I do invite you to do that in the future. One small part we were able to bring here was the Hatchie Bottom Boys, who are some great veteran musicians that Sean's been working with in his traditional music programming, and anybody that heard them last night was really impressed, had to be, with the caliber of traditional music in McNairy County, and that's just a small part of what they've been doing. So I'll turn things over to get started to Sean Pitts.
first of all, I want to say thanks to Roby and the commission members and the commission staff for allowing us the opportunity to tell just a little bit of our story. Another thing that came up this morning in Tom's session was the importance of narrative for telling our stories in ways that matter, in ways that are relatable to other folks, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I just want to tell you sort of the story of how we've come down this road, and maybe as we go along, pick up some points that might be helpful to you as well, in your own communities. I guess the most important thing to start would be to say how we got off the ground in our community, and it's probably the way a lot of arts groups did, by looking at the community and saying, what do we need? What do we need in this community, and what is there? What resources are there in the community that we can use to get there? The conversation started, I guess, at my dinner table, and then expanded in further circles out involving friends and people's arms that we could twist for funding and everything else. But keep in mind, as I go through some of our modest accomplishments in McNairy County, that 15 years ago there was no infrastructure in the county for developing arts programs, and as to the best of our knowledge, never had been. There had been some sporadic, spotty efforts here and there to do some arts programming, but there never had been an organization that put wheels under any of that programming. They were just piecemeal, as I said, here and there. So from that beginning point, we began to talk about, as I said, the things that most communities want to talk about when they're talking about arts development, cultural development in their community. We built a successful community theater program, which is continued up until this day, programming in a new building. Music, most things that everybody thinks about, the concert series in the park, which was a great thing, and development of our community band and chorus program, which is participatory in nature, of course, and that was good. Actually the visual arts showings for local artists and that kind of thing. And then literary, those were the four first programming committees, and there were some partnerships that were helped to develop those with our local schools, libraries, and as vagabonds, you beg and borrow space and use what you can where you can. We made liberal use of a lot of the city's facilities and things like that with the community center and UTM Center in Selmer. So we did have some support, and we had a great community response to all of that. Everything that I just mentioned was well supported by the community. We had good support from our business community as well, corporate investment in those projects, and that was all fine and good. Okay, we were really happy with all that, but we came to the point after about 5 years of doing that, we'd succeeded to that level, but we began to sit down and take a hard look at ourselves and say, what have we done and what haven't we done? And the statement that you see on the screen was something that stuck out like a sore thumb in our founding documents. It hit us sort of between the eyes that we had been involved in presenting and bringing a lot of things that might not have been available in the community to the community, but we had virtually ignored what existed already in the community. Okay, and so when you realize that, in what we do, you get two choices. Either you pay attention or you continue to ignore it and go forward. Well, we made the decision that we would be true to our original mission and take a hard look at some of those things. How we did that was, at the time, this was new to us. There's organizations in the state who've done great work, had groundbreaking work. Donald among those, Linda at Overhill had done great work in looking at their communities, and we borrowed and stole and looked at the things that they had done and talked to some of those folks, and very generous state arts community in Tennessee, and we got a lot of free advice. But as we sometimes say, we got free advice and then we made the rest up as we went along, and that's exactly what we did. But when we set about down this road, one of the first things that we started to take a look at was the traditional handcraft, and you see a lot of these folks on the screen. I could go by and name all those. Most of these people that are folks that we rolled up on their front porch and knocked and said, "We heard you do pottery," and they looked at us funny, and we explained what we're there for, and then they looked at us funny, and then after we made the third visit, they said, "Okay, they're serious, and we want to maybe see what they're all about." But all those folks are a group of our artists, which comprise our craft committee, which the initial project for that committee was on the left. You see a piece of print literature. We printed 20,000 or so of those and organized these artists and began to meet them together. It was a really neat process because some of them lived within a few miles of each other and didn't know that the other one was even there. And so it was a great thing for those artists to get together, take a look at each other, and begin to talk about, just have that conversation about what can we do to help each other and what can we do as an arts agency on the ground, in that community to help them as well. Some things emerged out of that assessment when we began to ask those questions that were a little more important than others. A couple of the things in particular, you see in the upper left there, the gentleman with the long beard and the broom, Jack Martin. Talk about him again in a minute. And then in the center of the screen at the top, a couple of quilting guilds. Now, those were existing things in our community. Jack had been involved in doing a broomcorn festival. We'll talk about that in a minute too. And there's 30-plus-year-old quilting groups. Well, the quilting groups are actually older than that, but they've been doing a quilt show for 30 years or so by the time we got to them. Nobody had ever paid any attention to that from our tourism offices or from the arts agencies. They'd been doing it all by themselves. Okay, and so as we begin to explore some of those potential partnerships, what can we do to help them? How can we support what they're already doing without reinventing the wheel? We established some pretty important partnerships with them. The quilt show was just this last weekend in Bethel Springs, Tennessee, thriving metropolis just north of Selmer. Great community though, with a lot of history and a great show. They have a great show, and those quilting ladies. This is another thing that's never discussed when we have this discussion, that for many years, Bethel Springs' budget, one of the largest contributors of the budget was the Quilting Guild. They paid for their community center there, and so not only do we try to work for the arts work for our communities in ways that are sometimes not recognized, but same thing is true in Finger, Tennessee, another small community where the Finger Dance, all these years has been providing the largest revenue stream in the city budget. So not only are we charged with working for the arts, sometimes they're working for us, and we don't often recognize that. We discovered as we were asking these questions, and we went to rural town halls, church basements, just anywhere people would talk to us and ask these questions about what's important about local culture. We discovered there was a strong, besides just Jack, there was a strong broom-making tradition, and you see here three of the families that have been involved in that. Some of the photos we've have dozens of photos now from these broom-making families as we've been getting to catalog and collect this information. On the right-hand side, that's Jack Martin and his grandfather. We didn't even know that picture existed. Jack didn't know it existed. It turned up about a month ago. It's the only known photo of him and his grandfather who taught him how to make brooms. The bad quality of the photo is owing to the fact that it was clipped out of a newspaper. We don't know where the original is, but we're proud to have that one anyway. So, and then you see a couple of the other families there as well. It turns out there was still a strong and thriving tradition in the county besides Jack. There's another local broom maker also engaged in broom making, lived a few miles from Jack. They knew each other, and now we've got them talking again, and that's beginning to work for us. You can see a couple of things, ways that kind of fits together when you put the puzzle pieces together. On the left-hand side, that is a Broomcorn Festival poster. I'm going to brag on the Broomcorn Festival a minute. They're probably larger craft festivals, cultural fairs and events in West Tennessee, but there are not better ones. Jack insists on having the quality of artist at that event. He insists on being in control of that so that it's quality all the way down the line from the musicians to the demonstrating artists, and he insists that they all demonstrate. So it's not just about broom making, it's about traditional handcraft in West Tennessee, and Jack does a great job with that. He's on our board, by the way. He's our vice president of our organization, and does a great job with that too. The second one you see there invites you to all on your way back home, swing through Selmer, Tennessee, spend the night if you will, eat, buy gas, spend a little money, and see the exhibit, which is up through the middle of November. which is about that very thing. It's about the local broom making tradition. It's a great exhibit there at the new cultural center. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Great stuff. Both the Robbins family, the Hockadays, and a couple of others contributed items, and there's photos and some interpretive panels that talk a little bit about that tradition in McNairy County and indeed in all of Southwest Tennessee. And then finally, closest to me, we were lucky enough to have published an article in the Folklore Society Bulletin about the same subject, about the broom making tradition in McNairy County. And I'm going to do Brent Cantrell a favor, and since Linda Caldwell's a board member too, and invite you all to join the Tennessee Folklore Society. And if you do, and you have more interest about the broom making tradition, you will get not only this closest to me, you'll also get a great piece from Roby if you join pretty soon about the basket making tradition in Cannon County. Great material, a couple of issues back to back on material culture, and we were proud that they support us in that effort and got that published for us. If you bought this one and Roby's piece, which are the two you would really want to buy, okay, that would be $30, but membership is only $20. Right, but wait, there's more. Okay, I think they'll throw in a toaster oven or something like that. Okay, music heritage, no stranger in Tennessee. Everybody has their own unique music heritage. What you see there are a number of the photos we've collected, and there are dozens more of those as well as we've gone through this process of asking about what's important. You know, when you first start asking, even with the material culture, broom making, that sort of thing, there's some skepticism. Same thing's true with music. But once they've decided you're serious, I'm getting volumes of material, weekly now, and we think that's paid off. There's a sense of trust between our local arts agency now and the folks who engage in the traditional things that make McNairy County, and differentiate us from every other county. So, music heritage has been a big thing. Let me tell you about a couple of things that have come out of that. One of the things that kept coming up was the strong rockabilly or roots music heritage in McNairy County. And everybody thinks about Jackson. They have an International Rockabilly Hall of Fame there. It's a good place, and lots of good things going on there. Carl Perkins' home, and then just south of us, Tupelo, Mississippi, boyhood home of Elvis Presley. What we begin to find out as we ask this question about what's important about the music heritage is that things like Carl Perkins and Elvis Presley met for the first time in Bethel Springs. They weren't there for the quilting, okay? Actually, Elvis was playing a concert there. He wasn't Elvis at the time. He was that guy with a new song on the radio that Perkins had heard. And he came down and met him, and they had a discussion about Sun Records, and then weeks later, Carl Perkins was off to Sun Records and got his own record contract. So that was a nice little piece of history. Dewey Phillips, on whose life and career the musical Memphis is based, is from McNairy County. Hometown boy, still got family over in Adamsville area. Carl Perkins made his first known recordings, we believe, in Eastview, Tennessee, and McNairy County. Okay, so there's a ton of that kind of history, and that's so that resulted in saying, well, what can we do to call attention to that? How can we make that a part of our local picture? How can we emphasize that? Well, naturally, we'll paint a mural. Okay, that idea came about. I won't go into the whole story, but we had a young artist from the county who actually lives and works in Nashville now, but he paints in this mid-century modern style, and it was perfect for the project. We wound up doing these two murals, which are in downtown Selmer. Mayor Robinson may want to talk about that when his turn comes, about the impact of those, as well as some of these things on downtown Selmer and how he views that. On the tail end of that, of course, naturally, our economic development folks, Chamber of Commerce, came behind that. We were going to have a celebration, play some music. They said, okay, we'd like to get involved. What can we do? I said, you can run the festival. Okay, and so that's what they do. There's a festival dedication on the dedication of these murals. There's two other public art projects downtown as well, two installations that are sculpture related, three-dimensional, and you can see there's some scenes from the festival. I didn't mention that Highway 45 from Jackson to the McNairy County line on the Mississippi line was renamed Rockabilly Highway just on the outset of some of this. With apologies to my friends from Jackson, that the initiative behind that came from McNairy County. We insisted and were able to push that through from our Tourism Association, who've been wonderfully supportive of this effort as well as everything else that we do. There's some tourism folks here with us today. They've been so supportive of what we do and see the natural partnership that exists between Jackson, Chester County, McNairy County, all the counties up and down that highway with a strong music heritage. So that's coming together. The gentleman you see on your left there is a guy by the name of Stanton Littlejohn, who, long story short, this kept coming up as we did interviews for the cultural assessment as well. Made recordings in his home from the mid-40s until really into the 60s, but the first batch of recordings were from about 1947 until about 1957 or so, so a 10-year span there where he was making these recordings. And along the way, he captured some of the best string bands, fiddlers, gospel groups, and a young Carl Perkins' first recording made in 1951 in his home. So in cooperation with the Arts Commission, the Folk Life Program, were generous enough to help us out with the Commission Initiative Grant. We got some support from the Center for Popular Music at MTSU, and we're able to capture, as of now, about 195 tracks of music that were recorded during that time period, and we've got about 40 more discs still there. We don't know what's on. Okay, so that will be forthcoming, we think, pretty soon. So we thought that was a pretty big piece of the puzzle in terms of telling our story from the traditional culture angle. Sort of a phase two of that same project you see here was to get some of the folks who made those recordings, the informants, to Mr. Littlejohn's sessions together, and this just happened a few weeks ago. You see in the upper left-hand corner there, we're beginning to do interviews with some of those folks to tell what they know and to talk about what they're doing, or talk about what they were doing then in terms of their musical pursuits. And also to play a little bit of that music for us, and we've been able to program some traditional music in conjunction with those efforts. We were very honored again this summer to be awarded Henry Reed Fund Award for music preservation from the American Folklife Center, Library of Congress. The end game on all this stuff is all this material that we've been collecting, pictures, recordings, and all will become part of the Library of Congress, become part of the Folklife archive there. So we thought that was great. They also threw in a little funding to help us with phase two, recording the interviews and that kind of stuff. And again, the Arts Commission was generous enough to see the value in this to local culture as well and support that effort. So we're just now beginning sort of phase two. The last thing, and this is the thing that Mayor Templeton will probably want to talk about when his turn comes around. The photos you see there on the left-hand side are contemporary with the photos you saw of a lot of the musicians earlier, and contemporary with the Littlejohn recording sessions. That building where you see all those musicians in, or let me first by describing the picture, some of the best musicians from the area during that time are all in that photo. The guy who owned this building, which was a Ford dealership, was a musician himself and a strong music supporter and fan, and so there were no performance venues, in the county. So on assorted weekends and during the model year rollout, he would actually push everything back to the bare walls and drag this stage out here, and everybody would come in and jam. And that went on for many years in his Ford dealership. I could name, we've named everybody, I think, but 5 of the musicians in the photo, and the gentleman here is a young Carl Perkins, as identified by his family. So that was a lovely picture to have and find. We have several others that are being performed in that building. Here's the outside of the building. Look at the audience. Okay, so hundreds of people.
That was a mechanic's garage.
It was a mechanic's garage,
Right.
And so they're jammed into that space. Well, so far so good. But look at it now. That building, as you see down here in the lower right-hand corner, sat deteriorating for many, many years across from the courthouse. It had had a second life as a warehouse, as a in a local cable access TV station for a time. It had been a little bit of everything, but it was falling in on itself. And when we began to have the discussion with county government, particularly Mayor Templeton, about how we might be able to find a home for Arts McNairy, this building came to mind. It happens to be the building that you saw in the former pictures, as I said, where all that great music went on. You see some of the guys over here. This is actually the Hatchie Bottom Boys over here that Roby mentioned earlier. Two of those guys recorded with Mr. Littlejohn and also played in this building, and two of them were actually in that former photo that you saw with the large jam there too. So we thought that was an important part of our story as well. You can see, and Mayor Templeton can talk more about the mechanics of this, but you see the artist rendering in the upper left-hand corner there. You see the inside of the building up here, and then of course the overall view from the opposite side of the street. I guess that's from the top of the courthouse, isn't it, Mayor?
Yeah, it looks like it.
So, about a 9,000 square foot building. It's perfect for our theater program, perfect for our traditional arts programming. Has a great gallery up front where we actually have the exhibit now, and actually a couple of exhibits going on there now. So we've been wonderfully pleased that city and county government would come forward and support our efforts with this kind of investment. We share that facility with McNairy Regional Alliance, who staffs it as a welcome center, visitor center, I think I'm supposed to say, during the day, during normal business office hours, and then we have it on nights and weekends for all of our programming. They, of course, babysit our exhibits and do so happily, and that's a wonderful partnership for us as well. Before I conclude, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the partnerships that have made all these things happen. By last count, Arts McNairy had partnered with about 15 or 16 other organizations for programming efforts and co-sponsorships and funding and all those sorts of things. Some of the ones that I mentioned in particular, of course, the tourism folks who've been so great to us to promote what we do. They see it as a natural extension of what they do. We give them something great to talk about and to draw people to the region. The economic development agencies, McNairy Regional Alliance, Selmer Business Alliance, some of the others. I've already mentioned the Folklife Center at the Library of Congress, Tennessee Folklore Society, and others. I didn't mention Southwest Tennessee Development District, who was also instrumental in helping us plan for the grant that actually and loan, which actually purchased that building, and Mayor Templeton can talk a little bit more about that as well. And of course, TACA, who a lot of our artists that we turned up during our cultural assessment at one point comprised about half the membership of TACA West. So we think having them organized in that way locally actually, helped with some of TACA West's efforts, and we're proud that they were members of that organization as well, just because of the cross promotion potential and those sorts of issues. I'm almost done. Am I on time?
You're doing great.
Okay. I'm not going to go through all this, but a couple of things just to sum up some thoughts about what's been discussed earlier in the day and some of my own thoughts about that. I'm only going to pick up on a couple of these things in the interest of time. In probably the third one down, revisioning the roles for arts agencies. I think oftentimes in the local setting, we're not looked at as valuable partners in economic development or in community development. That's not the case in McNairy County. I can't tell you I know how it got that way, but let me give you a great example. When our economic development folks found out that there was a Amish community moving into the county, I think I shared this with Roby not long ago, that an Amish community is moving in next to Mayor Templeton's house, actually, in the Stantonville community. We were on a short list of people that they call to give us that piece of information. Now, why do you suppose they would tell a local arts agency that an Amish community was moving to town? Obviously, the first order of business was deciding how waste disposal would happen in an Amish community, and calling the appropriate people at how we would traffic buggies on McNairy County roads. Those are big issues, okay? But we were about third on the list, which says volumes to me about how our economic development folks view us as a local arts agency. They knew, to begin with, we had a respect and appreciation for local cultures, non-traditional cultures, because of the programming that we had already demonstrated in the county, and so they thought it important that we should know that this community was moving into the county. Obviously, we did want to know, and have already made contact with that community through some of our folks on our board. In fact, Jack Martin, who's the perfect candidate to go, he's got the long beard, and he looks like he could be Amish. And so we actually were able to make contact with them. I think it says a lot about how we envision our role in local cultural development, and also it sets I think a precedent for how you're going to interact with your economic development folks. So I want to talk about that in just a second, and then I've already mentioned one other thing, and I rarely hear this talked about in these discussions, but I read an essay by Wendell Berry over the summer, and I shamelessly stole the first part of his title of his essay, and this was delivered before, I guess, the National Endowment for the Humanities. It was a Jefferson lecturer for 2012, and he delivered this wonderful address, which is primarily about place. It was talking about soil conservation primarily, and why people would want to do that. But basically, it was about love of place and affection for the places that we all come from and live in. And I couldn't help thinking, as I was reading that essay, and I read it over and over again, that has profound implications for what we do. A love, affection, and respect for the places that we live and the cultures that we come from, I think is paramount when we start to talk about local cultural development, and it's indispensable. In my view, it's indispensable if we're going to get anywhere with underserved populations. There's an awful lot of talk about how to reach underserved populations. Well, the best way I found is to demonstrate an interest in the things they're interested in, and that may be traditional music, it may be basket making, it may be broom making, it may be any number of things, but that is a viable role for a local arts agency, and I don't think it's always viewed in that way. And then finally, my favorite cheesy arts metaphor is the one of the community as the canvas as well as the palette. And when you looked at it in that way, we're not really doing anything different in our community other than drawing from the local color, okay, rearranging it in ways and patterns that can make sense, that other people can understand, that other people can see and embrace. And then the canvas is the community, and in that role, that casts us as the artist. One of the things that was very unsatisfying to me about being involved in arts administration was the fact that there was so little creativity in it for me. Okay, and I'm a completely right-brained person. I'm a musician and a visual artist, and I fancy myself a poet. Okay, but I'm not a very good one. I came by arts administration secondhand. What's been very satisfying to me is viewing a role as a cultural development agency in a rural community in this last light, so that we can look at our community and combine that local color in ways that's artistic, that it's expressive, and it has proven very satisfying for me. I encourage you to do likewise in your community. And that's, I think, all I have to say, unless there's a slide I've forgotten. That's it. I want to introduce, I think Roby's already done a good job, but Selmer Mayor David Robinson, I want to brag on him for just a second, that David has never said no to me. Can you believe that?
Have you ever tried to say no to him?
David has never said no. Anytime we've come to him with a project, Mayor, we need the fire department to hose down a wall. This is what it sounds like in practice. We need the fire department hose down this wall. Why? We're going to paint a mural. Okay, all right. And so they hose down the wall. bought a green space for the farmers market in Rockabilly Park, right alongside the Rockabilly mural too. Does some funding, has been our most consistent and largest funder over the years in terms of operational support, as well as contributing operational supports for the new facility. So I don't often get a chance to brag on him in public, but this is the one chance that I do. So I want to thank him for coming and let him say a few words, and then I'll go ahead and introduce Mayor Templeton while I'm here too. Jay was the mayor at the time the Lotta Building project came to fruition, and I don't know if I held his hand or he held my hand throughout that process, but there was a lot of bitter weeping and tears that went on throughout the process, but we got there in the end. And it was largely due to Jay's leadership and a great county commission who supported his leadership and went along with his leadership in that project. And he likewise has never told me no. I remember the conversation, the first one, he probably won't, that when this first came up, when after he was elected mayor, and we sat down, and I said to him at the end of the conversation, we were eating lunch, I was doing my arts guy spiel about what all Arts McNairy had done for the county and how wonderful it was, and the tax dollars that it poured into McNairy County and all this sort of thing. And Jay looks at me and very, very flat says, "What do you want from me?" And I said, we need a place to call home, and that's how that conversation began, and has come to fruition in a great partnership between us and the county. And so I'm gonna let those guys talk.
You apparently bought lunch that day.
I think I did.
Whoa. Well, thank you for those kind words, and I think being the only elected official up here that's got to run next year, I'm going to claim credit for all of it. Okay? Just for a short while, and then I'll give it back. As you can see, Sean is pretty enthusiastic about what he does, and we have to hold a gun on him most mornings to get him that excited. So he's very good, very I think a great partner for the city, quite frankly, talking about the murals. And one of the things that I recognized when I ran for office is Selmer needed some lipstick. I mean, she was looking a little rough. She needed a little lipstick, and working with Sean and the arts group has been it's helped us transform primarily a otherwise kind of shabby place into a place that folks really like to come through and look. The murals are, and tell me again, they're internationally recognized, right? Which is pretty cool for a small town. I think Sean was telling me what's the 3, and we got 2 of them.
Yeah, there's on Mural Locator, which is an international registry.
Yeah, and so we got 2 of them in Selmer, Tennessee. He's been great working, as he mentioned earlier, with McNairy Regional Alliance and the town of Selmer to kind of kick off the Rockabilly festivals. And the way I look at it, in the light of economic development, hand in hand with that is your community development. And if you don't look like a community that's going to have fun and that you care about it, and you provide some activities and festivals that draw people not only from outside the community but actually from within your community. And so Arts and McNairy has been a great partner with the city. And I don't know if you mentioned while you're here, we've got a very large oak tree. We're looking for a chainsaw artist that can carve that up for us. So if y'all know of anybody, put them in touch with either Sean or myself, because we have you got somebody? Good. We've been looking for 2 or 3 years, and but I expect that to continue. The partnership, obviously the Lotta Building, and Jay, I'm going to take credit for that too next year, by the way. Has been a tremendous addition, and I see it. Again, just growing our community, and particularly, I'm obviously concerned about Selmer, And it does give folks a lot of other activities to do. And as we progress, we've got a pretty active chamber director, and he and Sean get in cahoots, and we just never know what they're going to come up with next. But it's always exciting and it's always fun. So, here, Jay.
All right, thank you. David, I think it just continues to wants to go. There you go, thank you. We found something for the mayor of Selmer to do. But I served with him 4.5 years and always wondered exactly what he did. Now I know.
Now you know.
I want to echo what David has said about Sean. You know, it takes a lot of folks anytime you have an organization that succeeds as well as Arts and McNairy has, but somebody has got to be the captain of the ship. And Sean Pitts has been that for Arts and McNairy, not just Arts and McNairy, many other groups. And I just want to echo that. And you all are familiar with Sean's work, so I don't have to talk in great detail about that, but we do appreciate him and very fortunate that he's in McNairy County. About 16 years ago, or 15 or 16 years ago, I was a staff member for our congressman, and I got called to a meeting down in a little town called Mickey in southwest McNairy County, just actually up the street here on Highway 57. And the ladies group there had sat around and ginned up the idea of having a walking trail, and their mind would go from the Mississippi state line up to the Hardin County line, and then hopefully Hardin County would pick it up, and it would connect the Civil War sites in Corinth, Mississippi to Shiloh National Park. And I remember leaving that, thought that's a great idea, but there's absolutely no way in the world they'll ever put the funding together for that. Long story short, there was a gentleman who loved McNairy County as well as anyone did, not to have been a native there of the county, by the name of Jimmy Daniels, who was also West Tennessee field representative for then Governor Sundquist. Jimmy had been active in the Boy Scouts and really saw the opportunity and the promise in this project. Went to the governor, and pretty soon McNairy County, including the local match on phase one, there were 3 phases to the project, had secured about $3.5 million in federal money through the State Department of Transportation. Unfortunately, as it so happens often in not only rural counties but urban counties as well, local politics, local personalities got involved in that project, and after several of those dollars had been spent on design work, the county commission, under a lot of pressure, killed the project. And at the time, I was on the county commission and was only one of 3 that voted not to do that, but anyway, 18 did, and thought that money was gone. After I'd been in office as county mayor in 2006, for a couple of weeks, I had received a call from Southwest Tennessee Development District asking if I were ready to move forward on the McNairy County Welcome Center. And I questioned her because I knew nothing about the McNairy County Welcome Center, had served on the county commission for 8 years and had never heard of the McNairy County Welcome Center. Well, she produced the contracts that had been signed, but not approved, obviously, by the county commission, where we had contracted with Tennessee Department of Transportation for a welcome center, and a project out in the community called Purdy had been identified. Some of you that are Civil War buffs may know the significance of Purdy in those days, but was quite the town with a college and several other amenities as they could be on an old stagecoach routes. Purdy was a thriving town until the question came up in the early 1800s about whether or not to have the railroad. And in their wisdom and wanting to maintain the high quality of life that they had, they chose not to accept the railroad. And then within about 20 years, the county seat had moved to Selmer, a new town, and Purdy no longer existed for all practical purposes. Well, we could see pretty clearly that the idea of having a welcome center in Purdy, although it might appeal to some, was not in the best interest of McNairy County, and then that's where the conversation with Sean came into play. And what we did, we brought the county commission budget as well as building committees together, had Sean and his group came in and made a presentation, and really did surprise me, not because our commission, and we had a good county commission at that time, but a very conservative county commission. I was surprised, but those 2 committees, that idea, as I recall, had unanimous support among them. and we began to move forward. And keep in mind, this was in late 2006, early 2007. Took it before the county commission. Had numerous public notices because it did involve federal dollars, transportation enhancement grant money. Also, we were going through the process in order to leverage some other grant dollars through USDA rural development with a loan/grant program. Numerous meetings, probably in the 12 and a half years that I had involvement on the McNairy County Commission, that issue was voted on more times than any other that I can recall. Not always unanimous, but never without without any more than 3 or 4 dissenting votes. It moved, I think, pretty much well up until probably it came time to pull the trigger, so to speak, in 2010. And we began to run into some issues. I had an opponent who, for whatever reason, chose to make that the single issue, and my election became a referendum really on the Welcome Center there in McNairy County. And if it'll do you as well as it did me, I'll let you borrow it, because 81% of the folks in the county apparently agreed with us that we were doing the right thing there, and we moved forward. But it was frustrating. It was not smooth from the standpoint of our relationships, which were good. But I think it was a project that had not been administered very often through TDOT. We also, with our grant administrator, ran into some issues with some retirements, some other issues, and it didn't get managed quite as well as I would have wished for it to. But we did move through that process. The building renovation itself was not as timely as we would have hoped, but still able to get that done. And long story short, for a little over $1 million, McNairy County now has available, not just our county, but our region has available the McNairy County Welcome and Cultural Center, something that we're very proud of. And McNairy County itself, including the purchase of the building, a lot of money to me personally, but has a little less than $300,000 in that project. The rest of the money, certainly tax dollars, and we hope is a wise stewardship of those dollars into that project. But that's where we stand. Part of the agreement with TDOT would be that we would staff that facility. Certainly in McNairy County, a population of some 26,000 people at the height of the recession. We were in the 16% unemployment range, do not have a lot of financial abilities, discretionary funds there, could not just hire a couple of extra folks to come in and staff that facility. We do have an able Chamber of Commerce group, economic development group known as the McNairy Regional Alliance. I think you saw that on the board, and David alluded to those folks. That are funded jointly by the city of Selmer and McNairy County, along with some other partners at a lesser level. They were in need of actually having better space than what they did, so that group agreed to come aboard, and they actually serve as the staff for the Welcome Center during normal business hours. And as Sean mentioned, Arts in McNairy, as well as other interested community groups, as long as schedules permit, are able to use that facility after hours. So we were able to be just a little bit creative, but still stay within the parameters of the law, get a good project brought to McNairy County, and one I think the people are going to be proud of a long time. David talked about economic development. And we all struggle, whether we're Nashville, Chattanooga, Selmer, Tennessee, or Adamsville, or wherever. But I'll never forget, David, we had and there were some other issues, but we had an industry recruited that actually signed some documents, as I recall, to come to Selmer. And even to the point that the owner of the company came to Rotary and made the announcement one Monday at noon. He was so happy to be there. And I do think some other issues played into it. But what I'll never forget is late that week, I think on Wednesday and Thursday, his wife and children came to visit for the first time. And well, by the next week, the deal was off. And a lot of that, I think, had an effect when she got there and looked around and realized, at least in their mind, a lack of opportunity for the children. And we see that even in existing industry, where upper management wants to live closer to Memphis or Tupelo or Jackson and not be as invested in the local community as I, as a former county mayor, think that they ought to be. So hopefully with Sean's group and some other things, this will give a venue for those type of things. And I'll close by saying it was a controversial project with some people, no doubt about that, and it's somewhat humorous, but thinking back to Purdy and the railroad and shifting it to something that they didn't want really killed the community. I had a fellow kind of in the heat of the thing came up to me one day. Sean was brought into the conversation by him, and I just listened. I didn't defend you too heavily, but he went on and on about a waste and was telling me about no one cares about arts or who can throw pots or paint pictures or whatnot, or who wants to see plays. He just railed on, and finally he kind of stopped and he pointed his finger and he said, Mayor, what's wrong with this town? And I said, no, sir, won't you tell me? He said, they don't nobody want to do nothing. I thought, well, I think that's what you just spent the last 20 minutes telling me, that you didn't want to do anything. But anyhow, we did, and hopefully, I encourage you in your communities as these type of projects. Thank you, Mayor. As these type of projects come forward, support your local elected officials on all fronts. And Sean has been very good about that. He and his organization. They are not a one-issue organization. You see Sean Pitts and those folks with him at other things, active in the community, supporting education, supporting anything you want to, any example you might throw out there. So even though their heart is in the arts in this organization, they're not one issue, and that, I think, gives a lot of stability to the organization, and two, it brings a lot of strength to projects like what we've talked about here today. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate all the remarks, and especially the point of view of elected officials. So often we talk about them, or they're part of our plans, but we don't often engage them in discussions like this, and I think that's as clear as it's been made here, really a part of essential partnering on a local level for these things. I'd like to get some commentary now from our two other panel members. Donald Phan has, I've referred to Arts and McNairy as our better mousetrap in West Tennessee, and in the previous decade, the better mousetrap in Middle Tennessee for rural arts development. Certainly, Arts Center of Cannon County has just made incredible strides, and Donald Phan is a local guy who came to the helm of that organization in Woodbury, and has done a very masterful job of overseeing that, and so he's been down the same road in some ways, and I think a successful building project was kind of a hub of people of taking their efforts seriously in the same kind of way, and I'm sure he's got some reflections on how the summer experience relates to the Woodbury experience. And finally, our keynote speaker, Tom Borup, by the way, I was at a meeting in Washington several weeks ago, and one of our jobs is to try to keep keep people in Tennessee aware of national standards, and a lot of that, of course, is the double talk. And the one that I picked up in Washington is apparently the new phrase is the view from 30,000 feet. And of course, Tom being a national figure and a writer on that level, synthesizing experiences in a lot of different ways. I think Tom brings us the view from 30,000 feet, and we'll see how that looks at issues that are on the table in the summer experience. So Donald Phan at first, and then Tom Borup will give us some responses.
I just want to say, Sean, I've been talking to Sean on the telephone for about 12 years now, and today was the first time we ever met face to face. So that shows something about Tennessee and rural Tennessee. We don't get out much. The Art Center of Cannon County is in Woodbury, Tennessee. Woodbury is a town of 2,300 and a county of 12,000. We run an 18,000 square foot facility. We serve about 40,000 people a year on site. We serve about 150,000 people a year through websites and recordings and all the other myriad of things that we do. We run every year on about 80% earned income. That's an average over our 30-year existence. And we have an estimated economic impact on the community of about $1.2 million. We run a community theater. We run a crafts gift shop. We have 2 gallery spaces. One's a cultural museum with a large collection of Cannon County baskets. You heard Sean talk about the broom making tradition in McNairy County. For us, it was a white oak basket making tradition. We also have a Grammy award-winning record label, which is what Sean and I have been talking about here over the last year and a half or so as they've gotten into their recording process. You know, one of the biggest questions I get when people talk to us about just different elements of our programming is where'd that come from? You know, how'd you start out as a community theater and end up with a crafts gift shop? Or how'd you start out with this arts organization and end up with a record label? And the whole concept of what we're talking about is turning opportunities into assets, or assets into opportunity, one of the two. I think they're about the same thing, really. But so I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about mindsets, because, you know, if you're really setting out to figure out how to do that, you can't say, well, I'm going to discover one of the most significant broom making traditions in Tennessee and capitalize on that, because, you know, there's only one of those. So the 3 things, and I'm going to back those up with a few war stories. The first thing is always having an entrepreneurial mindset. What I tell people is nonprofit is a tax distinction and not a state of mind. And really, an entrepreneurial mindset's about taking things that don't look like they go together and putting them together. Several years ago, we have a local historical country music figure named Uncle Dave Macon, and we talked about doing a driving trail surrounding Uncle Dave for several years. And couldn't figure out the semantics of it. You know, you got to have some sort of audio component to capitalize on it because it's music. And how do you make that happen? And where do they pick it up, or do they have to buy it, or how does all that work? And so we've been kicking that around for about a year and a half. I was sitting at dinner one night talking to a realtor friend of mine. They were telling me about the newest thing in realty, which was the talking house. And it was a little thing that looked like a CD player, but it was really a low wattage AM radio transmitter. It recorded 5 minutes of information about the house. People pulled up the sign out front, tuned it into 1610, and they had a sales pitch without the realtor having to be there. Well, that just clicked in my head as a way to do the Uncle Dave program. So we put 4 of those out there together with Uncle Dave's music and history around that, and created a driving tour that uses AM radio technology. That's been up, I don't know, 10, 12 years now. It's been running. These little things are like bricks. I mean, they just keep on cranking it out. The most unreliable thing that we found is one business that we put it in keeps unplugging it to repaint and don't plug it back in. But in any case, use it, taking something that's for one purpose and adapting it to an arts purpose is where that's coming from. Sean, I think, painted a really nice picture of the next thing, and that's know your community. And that there's several things that work along those lines. First, you have to talk to people, and you have to talk to lots of different kinds of people. You can't just talk to the people that agree with you. You can't just talk to the people in your social circle, but you have to talk to people from all different walks of life. You have to ask questions, and then most importantly, not only talking to them, but listening to them. And understanding their perspective and their point of view. We're lucky in Cannon County to have about 150 to 200 craft artists operating in our 30-mile radius. A big chunk of that is a traditional chair making or a chair making tradition that kind of grew up alongside the basket making tradition. When we first started developing our craft artists, one of the things that frustrated the daylights out of me were dealing with the chair makers, because what we were trying to do was shift them into a retail mode. I mean, these guys are making 150, 200 chairs a week, and they're selling them wholesale for $35. And if somebody came up and wanted to buy 2 chairs, they sold them for $35 too, and they couldn't figure out why in the Sam Hill they should deal with people for the same price. So we spent years trying to say, well, charge them extra, charge them double, and that didn't seem right to them. So finally, what we realized is they wanted to be in the wholesale chair business. And so we looked for ways to figure out how we could then help them do that. The project we came up with was, we call it the Cannon County Rocking Chair Project. We spent $500 and bought, I think it was 14 different rocking chairs, each one from a different maker. We put them out on the front porch for our building, and put a little plaque on it that said who made it, and then we printed out a little in-house, copied on color paper brochure that identified those makers, and if they wanted to sell wholesale, if they wanted to sell retail, how that happened. What it gave us an asset just in our building for having seating out on the porch and that kind of Cracker Barrel feel, if you will. But also we had not only retail folks coming up, but we had wholesalers who were looking for additional outlets that would come up, look at the chairs, and then go and find those. So we found a way to help serve those artists, but on their terms. When we were trying to serve them on our terms, it didn't work. And we finally got there by actually listening to what they were trying to tell us rather than what we thought they should be trying to tell us. The last thing I want to talk about is keeping an open mind about what opportunities are. And this really isn't something the Art Center's done, but it's something that's happened in our county, and it's public sector, really. Short Mountain, which is an area of Cannon County, has long been known for their moonshine. And so a few years ago, this group of brothers decided they were going to put a distillery on the Short Mountain and capitalize off that. And so what they've done is in a dry county, they have been able to pass a referendum for the manufacture of alcoholic beverages, and they have opened Short Mountain Distillery. Well, what they realized about halfway through the process is they didn't know how to make moonshine. And so what they did was they went out and hired the people who had been doing it illegally and gave them a place to practice their craft. When you think about it, it makes perfect sense because we all knew who they were. But it's what they in essence have done is given these guys a validity, and they've given them a way to tell all their stories. And they now lead the tour, as well as making the moonshine, they lead all the tours. So they're telling all these moonshine and war stories about this past and this history. I was telling Roby this morning, I was watching TV the other night, a show, I don't even know what channel it was on, but How Booze Built America. Have you guys heard that? And all of a sudden, these Short Mountain Distillery guys were up here on TV. And they highlighted on them, it's been open less than a year now, but they highlighted on them because they had a history and they had authenticity of these people and had permitted them to tell their stories. Now, identifying moonshiners as A, an asset, and B, an art form is something that may be controversial, but you have to keep an open mind about that in order to capitalize on that. So there are my war stories. What you got?
Well, thank you. I just want to respond to Roby's Washington D.C. phrase, because the one I heard recently that they're using is that we're building the airplane while we're flying it. And when you're at 30,000 feet, that's pretty scary. So I guess, but that's always been for all of us. We're making it up as we go along, really. There's no roadmap for this kind of work that we're doing. Just some reflections, and I could go on and on because I was taking a lot of notes. There's some really wonderful, fascinating things. But just to pick up, first of all, on Bill Loeb's comment in the other room over the lunch, the developer from Memphis, who talked about, well, you know, developers, we can build these places, but it's the arts that bring meaning. And just to modify that, because I think more what you're doing, Sean, is you're not necessarily bringing the meaning. The meaning was there. You're illuminating it, you're highlighting it, you're celebrating it, and you're probably bringing a little, you know, here and there into the mix too. But I think that's what we really do the best, and that's real asset-based work, is to be able to see what's there and really illuminate and highlight that. Some of the stuff I was really impressed with the work that you're doing, the stitching and the weaving of people who were already there, a couple miles apart or maybe a little further, but didn't know each other. That's really valuable, wonderful kind of work. And again, very much about asset-based, like really looking out there for those assets and how to stitch them together in a way that amplifies the meaning and the power. And I think the talk about the murals. One of the things, and referring back to what I talked about this morning, because the pride and the sense of this is important, this is significant, it's recognized widely, we appreciate it locally. It really amps up community pride. I hope it does. I mean, the good ones really do. And that goes a long way towards helping build this more functional civic culture. Because if we can sit around and we feel proud about something together that's been accomplished, that's building on that functional civic culture, and that's really important work to do. And then just to and maybe throw this back for other conversation, there's three sort of contradictions, or maybe seeming contradictions in this work. And it's true in the arts, and it's true in the political arena. There's always contradictions, and you're trying to bring them together somehow. But the whole idea of from the mission, I think it was about preserving and promoting culture. And I think to preserve something really requires creativity. It just doesn't. You don't just freeze it. You know, you got to think. You got to record it. You got to get it on the internet. You got to the radio broadcast thing you were talking about. Really adaptive ways to take what we have and be able to hold on to it, learn from it, extend it, and it's going to adapt and morph in the process. I mean, no cultural tradition is absolutely frozen in time. It comes from somewhere before it got to that place, and it's going to go somewhere into the future. So there's always wrestling with that contradiction about how much freezing in time and how much adaptability are we doing. And also, it's kind of interesting to think about the rockabilly stuff and other cultural forms over time. At one time, and I'm almost old enough to remember, you know, the earlier phases of that work, but that was transgressive in its time. That was what my parents did not approve of, that kind of stuff. So it was new, it was transgressive, it rubbed some people the wrong way, it went against some older traditions, and now it's part of the heritage. So we're constantly creating, I hope at least, we're constantly creating new heritage through some things that might be transgressive, it's culturally transgressive in some way or another. And I kind of wonder, so what's going on now in your community and in others that's the transgressive cultural acts that our kids, grandkids will celebrate as part of the heritage? You know, we may not approve of it. It may be kind of outside the bounds, but in another generation or two, it's going to be held up as something important. And it's hard to recognize what that can be. But if all we're doing is preserving the old and we're not somewhere out there creating the new, we're in trouble. So hopefully that's part of it. And also the final sort of contradiction that I was listening to and thinking about is also that balance or tension between the welcoming and the preserving. I mean, we're celebrating the culture that's here in this place. We're lifting it up and elevating it, and yet new people are coming in with different cultural traditions, and the Amish, and I'm sure there's folks from Mexico or south of the border, or I mean, where I live, we've got an amazing mixture of people from around the world who are coming and settling and establishing their roots and telling their stories. So how to balance that? And John, I mean, I don't know where the Amish story goes or where it will go, but certainly there'll be other people too who will come into the community and look for a place where they can find some connection. So those are three sort of balancing acts or navigating contradictions that I think is really interesting in the work that you're doing. I don't know if you have any thoughts in response.
Yeah, one thing I would like to say that as you were talking about, the murals and the new and the old, that's been a satisfying project on a lot of levels. Obviously, you can tell from the pictures, they're extremely high quality murals. They're not slopped on. They're very thoughtfully done by a very high quality artist. And as David mentioned, I think there are 3 or 4 murals on this international mural locating project mapped out, and two of them are in our town. It's interesting what you said, that even though the theme of those murals are music that was before a lot of these kids were born, okay, young folks have really responded in very positive ways to these murals. Brian told the artist who did the mural, you may have seen the one, it's everything's cut off from about here up. You just see the instruments and you see the bodies, you see the movement, in the music. And that one in particular, had a youth following almost from the outset. Brian's favorite thing to say about that, as it was in progress, people would drive by and say, "Where's the heads? Where's the heads?" Okay. But young folks seem to instinctively get it, and Brian is a young artist, and so that's satisfying on a lot of levels. Not only the fact that it brought in, a fan base, so to speak, from a younger demographic, but also that it was commemorating a very old music tradition, or not so very old maybe, in our county, and that was plus it's just a very high quality visual arts piece, which exposes people in a rural community who might otherwise go to a museum, but they will see that for sure just on their morning commute, to work. So I was thinking about that as you were speaking, and then on the issue of where do you go with the new? I don't know where the thing with Amish is going. I know there's one place that they fit in pretty well, and that is in this artisan trail project. They're already beginning to put some of their products out, and so they're beginning to interact with that group of our artists even now. I don't know where that goes, but that's a natural plug-in place for them. And then continuing the dialogue next with non-traditional groups and as part of the cultural assessment efforts. We're one of the few arts organizations, I think, of our size who has a standing committee which is dedicated to continuing that dialogue in our community with whoever we may find, and I think that's essential for future. Nobody knows. As Donald's pointed out, nobody knows what this is ever going to turn up. Okay, you're looking for whatever is there. It's like mining. It's like cultural mining, and that's I think that's an important part for most local groups to realize. If you're going to serve everybody, if you're going to serve everybody, you've got to be asking everybody, what they need. And so I was thinking about that as you were speaking as well. I'll let Donald talk about it if he wants.
What they need and what they bring.
Right.
Everybody brings their stories. Everybody brings some traditions or other creative assets along the way. Yeah.
We've got about 15 minutes for questions. I did want to, I know that Tom described this morning, he's rightfully proud of the Camel Burgers, and the folks from, we didn't get to this, but the folks in Selma are going to have to tell you about the home of the original Slug Burgers in Selma. But that is already a proven tourist draw. They are flying in to buy Slug Burgers to take back home. So it's been a long time. Slug.
Let me explain that. Let me just take a minute to explain that. There's a running argument between Corinth, Mississippi, and Selmer who really gets credit for the Slug Burger. Now I know that's a dubious distinction, or it may sound that way, but it's basically a soy grit burger. Started out as I think a potato flour burger, Depression era.
Kind of a hillbilly hamburger helper.
That's right. Yeah. But they're patted out and golden fried and so we have some great locations in our downtown area which serve Slug Burgers. And what Roby was referring to is our economic development folks were at the airport one time, and this gets their attention as well. When he's talking about local culture, we have a culinary committee now as well. They're standing at the airport, and a small plane lands at Purdy International, as we like to call it, out at the airport. And the guy gets off, goes and gets in the car, and the economic development folks stop him and say, "Hey, where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going to get a sack of Slug Burgers." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." Went and got a sack of Slug Burgers, gets on the plane, takes back off. Okay, so we have a proven winner in the Slug Burger. And if you ask the proprietors of the Slug Burger downtown. Okay, y'all ever eaten Slug Burgers? Our local folks have eaten Slug Burgers. Talk to some of our local friends about the Slug Burger. They will tell you if you're not local. Okay, we only use the small ones because the bigger ones are too tough. Okay, but there are no actual slugs in the Slug Burger. I don't think. Okay, I don't think.
Well, Eddie,
the tradition of the name is that it only costs a nickel for a slug to buy one. So the slug represents how much it costs and not necessary.
look beyond the first perceptions and learn the real local story.
Right.
Mary?
I just wanted to ask a question to the county mayor and the mayor of Ross. I'm real interested in this partnership between the county and the city over the building, the arts building. What role did the city play? The county had a transportation enhancement grant already, and then you also applied for USRDA funds. So what was the city's role?
We've been asked to repeat the question for the video, and that is the respective roles of the county and the city in the building project.
How was it funded? If, how did you work together? Because I find that very difficult in my community, the city and the county governments to work together on the project.
Let me see. Let me first address the relationship that Jay and I had from the get-go. We got with each other, and when he was elected and I was elected, and just said, hey, how do we work together? So I mean, it's a lot easier to work together than it is to fight. And the previous administration and mine, and I guess yours, didn't get along very well. And I think Jay and I both saw that and said that, we need to move on from there for Selmer and McNairy County. As far as the city's involvement in the building, I let the county pay for all of it, and I took the credit.
Did you purchase? The building was purchased.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Jay can answer that. Our involvement primarily was in a support role, just to go.
The county did outright purchase the building, and that purchase price of the building went toward our soft match. And beyond that, I think the county, and it was completed actually after I left office. I'm not sure exactly, but at one time I had it figured that the county should have around $280,000 or $285,000 local dollars in that. And then you all have given some money on furnishings, I believe, haven't you?
Yeah.
Now, our partnership goes back many years in the economic development with the city of Selmer, and McNairy County contributes the bulk of the money to operate for the Economic Development Corporation, Chamber of Commerce, now McNairy Regional Alliance. We are equal partners in that.
Is there only one? Is Selmer primarily the main community in McNairy County, or are there other?
Well, there's 10 incorporated in McNairy County. Selmer is the county seat and the largest town in the county.
I want to say in relation to that too, that, and this is no small affair, that, when we were faced with looking at the operations of the facility and strapping on this new, financial commitment that was going to mean to us, City of Selmer said, well, we can help. We can help. I mean, there's going to be a significant operational expense, utility expense, those sorts of things. And so they were very quick to offer operational support for the building, which has been a key and crucial part of the success. And we hope that will continue, Mayor.
They need those funds every year
I knew that.
for operational support. You receive a regular, annually, a contribution from the city.
Selmer, as I mentioned, and has been our largest financial contributor over the years. We've not been in existence a single year that they did not offer support for our operations. And then when we actually got in the building, they anteed up again, additionally, not above and beyond the operations money. They anteed up again for operational support of the building, which meant that we didn't have to sacrifice anything. Which, I mean, how often does that happen? But we were thrilled that they did, of course, and we hope that will continue, Mayor.
We had a question back there.
Yeah, since we've got the elected officials here, that's not an opportunity we get very often, without political kickback, if you get would you say, and this is an initial question I'd like to follow up, would you say that the investment in the arts is an expensive proposition, or is it relatively inexpensive for a payback?
Interesting.
The question is it a good investment?
Well, relative. Is it you view it as an expensive opportunity, or one that's relatively inexpensive for the payback?
So the question is it viewed as an outright expense, or as is it worth what the community receives in the investment? Okay. I'm trying to rephrase the question. I should just repeat your question.
Basically, I look at it as an investment in our assets. I mean, obviously it's an expense line item in the budget, but I look at it as primarily an investment, and I think we certainly get more back than what we put in from a community development aspect. We really don't know. We know we get extra tax dollars for the festivals and stuff that come in, but we don't have any way to track that. So just the buzz on the street after we have our festivals, or folks will come through and they'll look at the murals and just the feedback that I get, it's a pretty good investment.
My follow-up to that is, you referred to that somehow you get a little kickback from citizens over spending tax dollars on whether it's a welcome center or something else. Do you have any instincts about how to combat that politically? Or is that, like a lot of politicians, fear putting a foot in that water for fear of losing their job, but for jumping into something that might not be politically interesting to everybody in the community?
Jay probably took more flack than that. We get it every now and then, and I just say, hey, the city didn't have anything to do with it. It's all the county's fault.
and he's gone, so it doesn't matter. Well, really, it doesn't matter if it's arts. You get criticized if the road superintendent pays one road versus another, or if you buy a Chevrolet patrol car versus a Ford. If you've never sat in a courthouse office, you would be amazed at just what a terrible person you are and how much better things would be if you weren't there. So it's, there was a lot of criticism among certain sectors, but it wouldn't have mattered if we'd built a school or had a road paving project or renovated the courthouse or built a park or whatever we would have done. I would think from the same group of folks would have probably cost about the same amount of flag from it.
We as arts folks often hear that there are not budgets for these kind of projects, particularly from municipalities and government entities. And from our point of view, it's a relatively inexpensive investment for the return. That is what we see all the time, but that's not a message that actually pervades the political conversation across government, and that's just something that we hear often back in our direction.
Well, I'll tell you, 6 years ago or 7, McNairy County would not have been able to have done that, and local officials are under a lot of financial stress. We were fortunate due to some debt repayment schedules, due to some conservatism of my successor, as well as the good county commission that I had to work with, to able to cut our debt, raise our bond rates. We were in a financial position to take on a project such as this, as small amount as it may seem to some in local dollars. There was a time McNairy County probably could not have done that, and it wouldn't have been lack of willpower. It would have been a financial consideration, because still had to fund the sheriff's department, had to provide education, had to fix the potholes, and you have to make those priorities. And if it's a cash-strapped situation, unfortunately, a project like what we did would not have been able to have rated very high at that time.
One last comment. I appreciate seeing the affection between the three of you, because that's not something we often experience sometimes in this world that we operate in. So,
They like me better than I like them.
Sean actually buys lunch more often than Jay and I.
Jim?
Partly in response to Ron's inquiry, the most I'm Jim Crabtree from Cumberland County Playhouse in Crossville. The most successful impact statement we have had in terms of influencing local government and the community as a whole is that one of the tourism gurus from UT came in and he said in public that the Playhouse saved in every household in Cumberland County over $320 a year in taxes because of the tourism revenue that was brought in, that local people didn't have to pay. That's been the most effective reaction we've had.
Well, like we were saying, it's really hard to measure the fiscal impact of that, but it happens. I mean, folks have got to buy gas, and they're going to eat slug burgers, and they're going to stop and shop and do something. So it's coming. For us, in our community, we absolutely continue to search for things for our local citizens to do rather than carrying their tax dollars out of county, and that's the benefit to us.
Well, thank you. We are without a break between these sessions, and we're going to have to turn the room around, and y'all are going to have to get to the next one. I want to thank everybody on the panel, especially former Mayor Templeton and Mayor Robinson, for being with us and sharing this exciting story.
Thanks.